Hey everybody, welcome to the Quivercast.
You go left, I go right. Man, this wave is out of sight. Going surfing, going surfing, going surfing with friends.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the Quivercast, and I am very excited. Today we have Joe Turpel. How are you, Joe?
Oh, so good, Mike. Thanks so much for having me.
Dude, I'm super happy to have you on the show. I'm going to go back to your youngest memories. Did you know that surfing was going to be in your life your whole life?
It's a good question. My early memories of surfing were in Waikiki with my dad and my sister. And at the time, I don't think I realized it was going to completely take over my life. I was super into baseball, super into soccer, playing sports, and we kind of were playing like sandlot baseball games in front of my house in this place we lived in Manoa on Oahu. And my dad would just be like, "Hey, Joe, it's time to go surf." And I'd just be like, "Hey, Dad, we're in the middle of the game. It's like bottom of the ninth, I'm up, you know?" And he's like, "All right, we got to go." And I'd still be kind of like, what do you mean? I was having so much fun in the game. And he'd be like, "Well, I'll give you a quarter for every wave you catch." And for some reason at that age, I was just like, "Oh my gosh, you guys, I got to go make some money." And we'd go to the beach and he'd have my sister and I try to remind him how many waves we caught. And he had this big bag of quarters and he'd pass out our quarters and then we'd go buy ourselves a double cheeseburger at Jack in the Box. It was such a fun thing to feel like we were earning our money, even though it was just like my dad going, "Hey, this surfing thing is going to be what you're going to want to do forever one day."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were kind of bribed, actually.
Yeah, those early days for sure. And then it wasn't until we moved to California when I was in 8th grade where it was like being the new kid. I actually went through a really awkward, like before my growth spurt time, we were staying at my grandparents' house and I was just overeating and I got really slow in all the sports that I loved and that was giving me joy. And surfing was kind of the one thing I was still able to catch waves and feel decent, and then I grew and kind of like lost a bunch of weight. It was a really pivotal moment where I just started quitting all like organized sports because it didn't feel the same. And then once I kind of leaned out, like surfing just took over. Then I didn't want to be at like a practice on a field when I knew the waves could be fun. So I think right at that moment, it was kind of went along with the move and being new and kind of like I still have the ocean. And it was sort of like that relationship that crossed the pond with me, and before it was just hanging with my dad and my sister. And then it was like, ooh, where can surfing go? I want to surf every day. Oh, what are these magazines about? I want to read these cover to cover. Oh, there's a industry a cover. There's the Pipe Masters, And then I started just going bing, 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 bing. Like, wow, I can't imagine doing anything else,
How was the transition going from Hawaii to California? Did surfing help that?
I think surfing helped a lot. I think it's culture shock, first of all. Everyone sounded a little bit different when I got to California, even dressed a little bit different. And I think that first year, I would be at like the stoplight with my parents, like the turn to go into Niguel Hills Middle School in Laguna Niguel. I would just be praying in the back of the van, like, I hope that light never turns green, I was like,
nervous.
I'm not going today, and it's just weird when you grow up in a small area and you know everybody and then you just don't know anyone. And I would just walk around the school at lunch by myself. I was like, where do I sit? It was I remember it was a crazy transition thinking back on it. Whenever I got dropped off at the beach, whether it be Doheny or Salt Creek, it was like, okay, I can just be me and catch waves. And I think that was I just kind of grabbed onto it with all my might and felt really centered and calm and didn't worry about needing a bunch of friends. And I definitely need to thank surfing for that, for sure.
What would decide where you were surfing Doheny versus Salt Creek? Two completely different waves.
Yeah, totally. Well, my dad had this 7/8 single fin. Still to this day, never heard of this shaper again, but it said Morlock on it. Morellock. Still have this board at my mom's house.
Wow.
And that board traveled with us, from Hawaii to California. My dad originally got it in the Huntington Beach area in the 70s. That board was kind of more catered to, I think, Doheny style. It was longer.
Yes.
I guess you'd probably call it a mid-length these days. But I would just run that thing into the rocks, just crash into those like cobblestone rocks, broke the fin off. I took it to Infinity Board Shop in Dana Point, and Steve Bainey was like, whoa, I'll do my best to get this thing back in the water. Only charged me like $20 for probably $150 job, and got back out in the water. And I didn't mind at the time, like going longboarding, shortboarding. My sister was really into longboarding. My dad had a big 10-6 single fin.
Wow.
So those ended up evolving into Sano days. And then as I kind of wanted to ride shorter boards, I would end up at Salt Creek on my own or with my friends eventually.
How was the Salt Creek crew treating you? Because that was kind of a heavy crew back in the day.
Yeah, I was so intimidated. I remember just like showing up on the beach. And at the time, my vision's really bad. I was just born with really bad vision, and I didn't have contacts yet. So when I first moved, I was still surfing with like croquis on and these really thick lens glasses, and they'd have water spots all over them. And it was like pretty soon I can't be too incognito. Everyone's like, oh, there's that kid with the glasses.
Yeah.
But I I couldn't see without him. I had no other choice. Like it was so blurry, and until I wore contacts, it was like a game changer. But yeah, just showing up and trying to pick out, like, especially in the winter months when gravels and middles were like, looking a bit more hollow and intimidating, I would just, tread lightly and try to get a couple. But I kind of didn't mind being on my own through it all. And eventually when you get a couple buddies, you do it together. And I think with the buddy system, you start picking off more waves and realizing who you stay away from and realizing the pecking order, of the guys that kind of run it, for sure.
Was Flame there then shooting? And was there a lot of because there's a lot of photos.
Oh, it was so surreal. Like showing up those early mornings with that flame light, and you'd look down towards gravels and you'd just go, oh my gosh, who's out today? Who's out today? And you'd just be looking down and someone's getting drained. And there's these big lenses even next to Flame of other photographers that have come down for flame light. And it was really cool. I remember parking one morning next to Dino Andino and Shane Beshin. Pulled up in this old school Suburban, and my friends and I were just going, oh, no way. Oh, that's Dino. That's Shane. That's crazy. Yeah. I remember they were so cool just with the small talk, just telling us that the waves look really fun. And then we just basically were following them down the hill, 20 feet behind them, just thinking we were being all smooth. But for sure, who are these drums, tagging us all the way down the hill. But those mornings at Creek were special. You're kind of going, wow, these are the best surfers in the world surfing Creek this morning. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, totally. All right. So then you progressed. Do you move away to go to college?
I did, yeah. So I originally moved to San Pedro and then Redondo.
Oh, really?
Beach. I went to Marymount College that doesn't exist anymore. It was like a 2-year school in Palos Verdes, and then from there I transferred to UC Santa Barbara and just fell in love with that whole coastline and everything with it. Yeah.
Real quick on San Pedro area, like Redondo Beach, how was surfing there? Did you keep surfing?
Yeah, it was amazing. Fell in love with the South Bay and chasing sandbars. It was actually really eye-opening. I realized I was still in a little bit of a bubble from a kid that was in Hawaii like 4 years before, and I didn't know about swell shadowing at all. And I remember showing up and in Redondo and the avenues there by Burnout and all that.
Yes.
I remember just going it's flat. Lowers is firing right now.
Right.
I don't get it. What? I remember just baffled at as an 18-year-old. Just I was like, how are we supposed to surf around here? Everyone I met was like, wait till winter, man. Wait till winter.
Yes.
There's a big island out there that's blocking all this south swell. And once I got familiar with it, learned about the low tides that didn't really help you out in that stretch, and just chasing sandbars, I really fell in love with that whole zone.
What about San Pedro? That's proper. Did you surf there?
I never surfed San Pedro. Yeah, I never did.
Stayed away?
I didn't really scope it too much. Yeah,
Okay.
I think I was getting enough waves that I didn't worry about it, you know?
Okay. So you moved to Santa Barbara to some of the best point breaks in the world when they're on fire. How was that? And how did that change your surfing?
Yeah, Rincon was one of the main reasons I really started like going, I need to get out of LA a little bit and go north. And
Yeah.
I surfed up there a few times just chasing a swell, and I just couldn't believe it. I think at the time, to be honest, it was like some of the best waves I've ever ridden in my life. And all of a sudden I'm like, all right, how am I going to school up here? How do I move up here? And you realize, you know, when you live in Santa Barbara full time, how much you have to be willing to drive. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
you got to be a road warrior. Talk about swell shadowing and everything. Maybe worse than the South Bay in some ways, of just how much time you got to put into the car and hunt down waves if you want to surf year round. And so I kind of fell in love with that though. Like going north, you know, Santa Barbara is
Mm-hmm.
technically Southern California still, but I think with a Central Coast attitude, and I think you can easily just head north. And if you've got the time and energy, you can find some open space and some great waves. And so that became something I really look forward to, especially in those summer months where Rincon's completely flat and all those points, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Is the Central Coast like? Did you surf in Llama or like where were you going? Or you don't rather
Yeah,
not
I
say?
loved going up north. Yeah, all those spots up north were fun. We'd camp on the sand and just get a couple of buddies. We'd drive all the way to Monterey. We'd
Oh
just keep
wow.
going. Yeah, we weren't afraid of putting some time on the road. And as you know, being in California, you start getting resources, you know, in
Mm-hmm.
different areas. And we had good friends we could stay with from San Luis Obispo to Monterey, Santa Cruz. Yeah, good group of surfing friends that we really would look forward to it. It was like an adventure. You're going camping, you'd
For sure.
buy a bunch of food and hit the road. And, you know, thankfully, especially back then, I wasn't a cell phone guy. So really present with where you were, you know.
Were you guys actually going on Surfline and checking? Okay, there is swell, or is this kind of early Surfline?
Yeah, no, yeah, those Surfline. Yeah, we had that access to all those maps and those early memberships online. So that was really cool. That helped a lot. Those
Yeah.
were heavily influenced our trips for sure.
Were you guys looking for just good waves, or are you looking to stay away from people, or both?
Both. Yeah. We definitely like were not into being around a lot of people, you know? And so I had a good crew. We tread really lightly, you know. I think we traveled really well. I still do. I still surf with a lot of those guys that I lived with in Santa Barbara. It was really cool. It was really easy just to float around. We'd learn about locations up the coast, and we're always super respectful, and ended up just gaining a lot of great friends in those areas. So next thing you know, the people that you're like just meeting a year down the road are calling you to tell you to come up. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool. When you went to UCSB, right?
Yeah.
What were you going to school for? What was your life plan?
Yeah, I changed gears quite a bit. I was like, oh, I'll major in business. I didn't really know what to do. I was like, okay, that's not going to work. And then I did communications. Early broadcast started happening, and I was always interested in TV production. And so I got an internship at a local ABC affiliate. It's like Channel 3. It's called KEYT up in Santa Barbara. And that really like showed me my path a bit. I was like, oh, this is awesome. I worked on the Friday Football Focus show. I got to see how the anchorman prepared and the reporters prepared, and they send me out on assignment random jobs like a public restroom story on State Street with a hidden microphone on me asking everyone where the bathroom was. I was like, oh, thanks. That's the intern's job right there, you know? Oh, my friends like
Yeah.
lost it. I couldn't shake that one for a while. It was so funny. I was just like getting
That's
filmed
funny.
from across the street. And I didn't know you could do this. I didn't know, like, because there's like people in the public just like being filmed and they're on the news. They had no idea. We had our cameraman
Right.
across the street in like a tree, like behind a tree. And I was on the other side of State Street, and I had a hidden microphone. And I was like, you know where the bathroom is? And the whole story, I better tell the whole story of why we were doing this. But there was these restaurants and shops that were getting paid a few $100 a month by the city to open up their business to public access for the bathroom.
Oh.
No one really wanted that traffic. So all they had to do to check the box was put up a little sign. So I would
Mhm.
stand under a little sign and no one had any idea that they could use that bathroom there because there's like an
Yes.
issue with the lack of public facilities. So, anyways, that was the assignment to kind of like show the town that this needs to be fixed. And yeah, that played on the news that night at 6 p.m. It was classic.
Oh my God. So how excited were you?
Oh man, I just loved being outside. I'm not very good at as an office guy. You know, I was like,
Uh-huh.
I get the shakes a little bit. So I think for me, the days interning where I was locked in 8-hour days on the computer, I'd be like, yeah, this is all right. And then the days where they're like, hey, Joe, you want to go to Ventura Mall? Jessica Simpson's like releasing an album and a cosmetic line. And, you know, for me, I'm kind of like, yeah, sure. You know, like I want to go
Right.
outside. And then the interaction of just having a conversation and even getting me in like a world like that was completely foreign to me. I would just leave there with something. I was like, that was cool. What a day. You know?
Yeah. So how does that lead into announcing for surfing? Like, did you start off in the amateur ranks?
I did, yeah. So in Santa Barbara, we had a college surf team, and all the NSSAs, they'd have people doing beach announcing.
Right.
And at the time, the early webcasts and broadcasts were starting to happen in professional surfing.
Mhm.
And so like John Shamoka and Martin Potter and all those guys were calling events for like the Quicksilver Pro, and this guy Sterling Howland was doing broadcasts for Billabong, and all the brands owned the media rights back then, but they were just trying to figure it out. And that time
Right.
it was just like scores would pop up with no vision. And I
Mhm.
remember being in college, like staring at like a blank screen with just seeing two names, like, you know, Mick Campbell versus Danny Wills. You know, I would just wait for a
Right.
number to pop up, and I was like, oh my God, Danny got an 8. And I would just like in my head imagine what he did, you know?
Yeah.
But it was right around that time. And so I was really listening to the beach announcers just giving out scores. And then I was like, man, I really want to do that. And I was pretty open about it. All my buddies I was surfing with, I would kind of do little mock calls of like when we'd show up at a beach and they would just start cracking up. They were pretty silly back then. And
Yeah.
I would just joke with people. I was like goofing off all the time. I was like, I'm going to call the Pipe Masters one day. And I don't think I ever really thought I was really going to do that, but it happened.
Yeah. The first contest that you announced, do you remember it?
Yeah. So the first one, as far as just starting, was in 2006. It was an NSSA event, Southwest Open season, and it wasn't a broadcast. It was just giving scores
Just
and
beach.
talking to people on the beach, like parents
Yeah.
and kids and team managers and stuff. It was at Brookhurst Street in Huntington.
Oh, yeah.
Big like combo swell, light wind, like just light offshore. It's beyond honestly the best I've ever seen that zone. I couldn't believe how good it was. It was like I remember Jeff Lukasic, a kid from he's a man now, from San Clemente. I remember he just like pulled up and leaned into this left and got so drained. And I remember like being in the tower going, did I do the right thing? Because I wanted to surf so bad.
Oh, yeah.
As I look back on it, it was the best thing ever. And nowadays it's like, gosh, every time I'm working, I want the waves to be as good as it gets.
Yeah.
At that time when I started, I hadn't missed too many swells, especially at 6 a.m. when I'm up and driving up the
Mhm.
coast. So that was the very first one, and it was really fun. The days went by really fast. The kids were ripping. Kolohe was probably around 11 or something.
Okay.
And Connor Coffin and Nat Young and all these like young superstars, Andrew Doheny and young Courtney Conlog, you know, like it was really
Yeah.
fun to see how good they were back then. You always knew their path, you know, even when they were
Right,
11
they're
and
killing
12, you know?
So that progresses, you work your way up the ladder, and then how do you get a tryout at WSL or?
Yeah. So back then the media rights were owned by the brand. So the WSL hadn't taken over the tour yet. So I did a year of NSSAs, just calling them on the beach. And then my older sister, Gina, total hero for me, we're super tight. She's working at Billabong at the time in the marketing department. So I've like gotten to know a few of her friends, and she's just always been like going, oh, this is my brother. She's the coolest older sister you could imagine, you know?
Right.
And David Stanfield used to call a lot of events back then.
Yes.
And I remember, he's awesome. Just
I did totally remember him.
notes and stories. And
Yes.
he was supposed to do this girls event in 2007 for the CT in a place called Bahia. It's like in the north of Brazil. And he had done it the year before. But back then, like there's sometimes with those jobs in that era, you'd find out like 2 weeks before your flight if you had the job or not, you know. He basically hadn't heard if he was going back. So he had to book another gig, you know. He does so many different things. I think he was calling a dog show on the East Coast, if I'm not mistaken. And he just is like, shoot, I gotta work. So boom. And then next thing you know, this girl, Megan Villa, she was the team manager for the Billabong team at the time. And friends with my sister, was just sort of like, hey, what about Joe? He just called nationals and, you know, Dave's not available. I just saw this email chain come back to me, and Graham Stapleberg was at Billabong at the time, and he just went like, yes, sounds good. That was it. And then next thing, I'm getting a call and going to my first like broadcast with a producer. And it was super duper simple back then. Man, I was a nervous wreck. I was like, the transition from the beach to then a pro event to then traveling across the world. And it's something I'll never forget for sure.
That's awesome. So the nervousness, did that lead to you wanting to get better? And what were they saying about your voice? Because you have the nicest voice.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Yeah, it was, it's funny with, I'm super audio. I don't know if you know what this is like. You know when you put on like a headset like you have now? I don't have one at the moment, but you can hear yourself really well. Mm-hmm. You can really hear how you're speaking and your tone. There's something like with that. When I have a headset on, I can hear my voice really well. And I always love singing. I was in a punk band and stuff. And I think that always helped me make sure I was in key all the time. And then on a microphone with a PA, there's certain mics, just the way you hold it. You learn how to like speak into certain mics, if it's omnidirectional or cardio or mic or whatever, all those different symbols. I got into that pretty early of like the sound, you know, of working a couple of events that were super low budget, sometimes without a sound engineer. You could do all the homework in the world. You could have all these stories to tell, all these stats up to date on every surfer. But if your sound's really bad or it's tinny or it's not EQ'd right, it's not going to translate at all. And so those early days, I started doing things like if we had a sound guy, I would bring him a donut in the morning, you know, just, how's it going? I'm Joe. And next thing you know, they're paying a little bit more attention to my levels, you know, and I started realizing on the other side, I could just work my way to the ground, but if the sound quality is off, it's going to be really hard to listen to. Those were little things I had to learn along the way. But as far as getting nervous and all that, I think all that stuff's pretty healthy, you know. At the time, sometimes it like gave me migraines. I remember the first pipe event I called, I had like a migraine. Wow. I was so stressed out. You can kind of build this thing in your mind like, oh my gosh, I just did an NSSA. Now I'm calling a championship tour event. What do I have to do differently? You know, what do I have to do now that I wasn't doing? And you realize you're already doing it. You know, the cameras might look gigantic, but you're doing the exact same thing. And that took some practice. And when I realized that, it really helped. I still have to think about it sometimes, though, whether it's the Olympics or whatever it is. You're like, whoa, why are my butterflies coming back? You know, and they're not as intense as they once were. I think a little bit of that is kind of healthy for performance.
Yeah, makes sense. How many events have you done now? Do you know? Or you lost count?
That's a really good question. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, maybe I kind of mark 2010 as like full time on the CT, but I forget there's like pro juniors in there. There's QSs, there's World Junior Championships. So I don't know. It might be close to 200. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And those are long days, right?
They're huge. They're huge. They're long days. And yeah, you're tested in some way every event. It's like surfing, you know, like, there's some days you leave the water and you go, oh, that felt really good. You know, like board felt great. My body felt great. And and then there's some days you're like, have I ever done this before? You know, like, and maybe it's not so extreme as that, but it's like, there are days where you're like, ooh, today felt like uphill, you know? And then there's some days that just fly.
Yeah. Do you do vocal exercises?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that as I'm talking to you. I've been like a little lazy in the off season here. Yeah, usually it's all about sitting up straight. I try to breathe deep, and I used to travel with a mini acoustic guitar because I always
Okay.
felt if I was singing a lot, I didn't have to worry about how strong my voice was because
Hmm.
I always think like the voice is like a muscle, and the more you use it, it's like being in the gym.
Hmm.
And when you're feeling great, like in the middle of the season, the last thing I'm thinking about is my voice, which is where I want to be. It's just there. And there's some events where I have to actually consciously make sure I'm using my diaphragm, I'm breathing right, my voice feels a little thin or whatever it is, and I've got to push a little harder, drink a lot of water, and make sure that you're not running out of gas by the finals. So, yeah, I think vocal exercises are important. It's hard when you're like waking up at 5 in the morning with roommates. You don't really want to just start going through like a big, like
Yeah.
operatic routine, but,
Yeah.
best case scenario, I could just start singing first thing in the morning and warm up.
Okay. So it's all really about going back to your musical days. I guess we didn't talk about it, but like your punk days of singing. That's your exercise for today.
Yeah, totally. When I was a kid, my dad would have my sister and I stand up against a wall. We're kids at this point. There's no like future in broadcast or anything.
Right.
My sister would always squirm and be like, "Dad, I don't want to do this," and we'd like back straight against the wall, tuck my chin down. Your tendency on higher notes is to stretch your neck out, which is really bad for your voice. We would do this little like, I don't want to blow out your earphones right now, but hey, 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 and like kind of get your
Okay.
diaphragm working, where he'd want to feel your breaths in your stomach rather than up here in your throat and
Okay. Interesting.
get a habit of breathing from your diaphragm. I think you can end up broadcasting all day. And I'm not the best at keeping up with that completely. I can kind of turn off pretty easily in the off season. So it's a good reminder as I'm talking to you right now, Mike, to get that going again before the season starts.
Yeah. The season's right around the corner. All these years of calling these events, you are around the best surfers in the world. Is that intimidating? Or was it?
Yeah, no, totally. I remember just even going surfing, those first few events were pretty wild. I remember going to Tahiti the first time, and Tahiti was like as flat as it could be, and
Hmm.
for me, like studying everything, I was already so frightened of the place, as I'm paddling out, knowing it's basically a foot.
Yeah.
And I remember CJ Hobgood was doing a little warm up, and I got a little wave, and I'm a regular footer. I was just going to go up for a little backside snap, and I just got stuck and just face planted. Like super routine wave, nothing frightening. Like you shouldn't even call it chopes. It was just the left, and
Yep.
CJ just said the best thing ever. He just started cracking up. He's like, "Well, you got that out of the way." It was like my nerves were tangible. Like
Yes.
I was overthinking it and going, "Oh my gosh, that's CJ. Oh, Andy just paddled out."
Yes.
It was a wild to like all of a sudden be sitting around and the four people closest to me, it's like Aki, Andy, CJ. I was just like, "What is going on?"
Oh
So
my God.
that was definitely like a mind-blowing experience that I eventually found comfort in. Thank goodness.
That'd be super intimidating. Today, are you still surfing a lot, like in between heats or events, or now that you're around surfing so much, have you kind of burned out on it?
No, it's crazy how I I don't know, I really love it for different reasons. I think it is like a relationship. Like you
Hmm.
probably feel that different parts of your life, it means different things, from the kid
Oh
that
yeah.
grabbed onto it with everything because I was the new kid in California, and I just it felt like my best friend, to wanting to get better and want to learn about competing, to getting older and being so close to surfing at the highest level where it can actually blow your mind because you're watching it all day, then you think you're going to do it, and it's humbling.
Yeah.
So now I definitely have always not been a big crowd guy. So if there's another place to surf besides the zone that everyone's warming up in, that's where I go. certain trips on tour are better than others as far as how much you get to surf, you know? So
Mhm.
I was just talking to somebody about the run I did this year from the Olympics to the finals at Lowers. It was like
Yeah.
I was broadcasting the Olympics from Connecticut at NBC Sports. Like we're not surfing. And so
Right.
I'm there the whole time. It goes the distance of the waiting period. I had to fly straight into the US Open. Those are really long days. I'm
Yeah.
just drained at the end, going to bed because we got to do it again. Flew out from there. I got home for a second to Hawaii, flew to Kauai, caught 2 waves real quick, jumped on a flight, went to Fiji, and then went right into finals. And you kind of like add that all up. You're like, I think I've ridden 2 waves in a month, maybe, you know?
Oh,
And with traveling and now I'm like learning I've got to stretch. I got to like figure out all these things so I can extend my surfing life. So now in the off season and being on the North Shore, we've had waves. It's like all of a sudden, first few sessions, I'm like, oh God, you know, like
right.
shoulders are hurting. And then now it's like, wow, last couple of days have been super fun and I start feeling normal again, you know? So
Right.
the beauty of such an extended off season now is you really start feeling like a surfer again.
And how many air miles have you had in your life?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. You know what? I think they have it on like on my One World. It shows you how
Okay.
many miles you have. I think I have something like 650,000, but there's
Jeez.
other airlines you take along the way, and bummer for me, but when I first started doing this job, I wasn't very good at like signing my frequent flyer number up. Now we've got a travel agent that does it for us, so
Okay.
that's helpful for me and my personality. But yeah, no, it's been cool. Every once in a while, you're like, hey, I've got enough miles to like use all these for a surf trip somewhere, which is nice, you know.
Do you feel privileged that you've been able to travel the world and see most places?
Oh, beyond. It's crazy, Mike. Like the idea of getting on a flight and going anywhere when it's
Mhm.
your job still gets me, you know, where you just go, this is so wild, you know. It's a lot of gratitude, crazy moments where you're pinching yourself for sure. And before I have the job that I do now, I had been, you know, to Costa Rica on a surf trip with friends. I used to drive across the border and go down to Mexico, and that
Right.
was kind of it, you know.
Yeah.
So it was like I got to go to all these places that I dreamed about and was in magazines and movies, and then it became normal. And now it's like, whoa, now you have friends in those places, and now you feel comfortable when you get there, you know where everything is. And that is a thought that always slows me down, and I feel like the luckiest person in the world, you know.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, going backwards to surf history, how do you know so much surf history, and do you ever get it wrong?
It's interesting with finding information, especially if it's on the internet. You always want to kind of fact check things and
Yeah.
make sure it's right. And I'll like approach an event like studying for finals like in college. It's sort of like, okay,
Mm,
pipe's coming up. And pipe as an example is an event that started back in the 70s. And
right.
like bells would fit this category. Those long historic events, you really want to marry the old and the new together,
Uh-huh.
you know, staying
Yep.
present with the action and the current stories, but it is an opportunity to tell some surfing history. And so, man, there's been some funny moments, man, like where I'm just this gullible young commentator trying to find information. And
Uh-huh.
one of the times I got it wrong, we were in Portugal, and he's a great friend of mine, longtime editor of Tracks magazine, great commentator, Reggae Ellis, and you know he's really
Yeah.
into snowboarding these days. His kids are unbelievable skiers, and you know just with a lot of great Australians, they love to have a laugh and they have a sense of humor, and practical jokes are common. And they just saw me just being like this young commentator, super gullible. And for Reggae, he's just this like wealth of knowledge of like decades of running that magazine and being in an older generation than me. I was just like, wow. So asking him questions about this time he hung out with Mickey Dora. And we're in Portugal, and he was like, oh yeah, you didn't know that he's actually been through Peniche, Portugal before? Like he's been here. He actually did a trip. I was like, no, it just blew my mind. I was like, are you kidding me, Mickey? Like the aura of Mickey Dora was just building in my mind. I couldn't wait. I was just so excited because I was blown away by the story. And my next heat, I'm calling a heat with Reggae Ellis. And I talk about this Mickey Dora story, and I think he's about to come with me because he's the source of this knowledge. And he looks at me with a smile and just kind of looks out to sea and goes, okay, a surfer in red needs an 8.5. And I was like, wait. And then we got out of the booth. He was like, "Ah, Joe, you're so gullible." And I was like, "Oh, that's not true." So yeah, there's been some funny ones like that. There is one about Jordy Smith traveling with a suitcase for his shoes. He's a big collector of like old Michael Jordans. And I was in Bolito for a QS, and all of his good buddies are there. And they were saying that he has a suitcase for all of his shoes. And I wasn't sure if they were like taking the piss or like, obviously in the moment I was like, no way, that's incredible. He really travels with shoes. They're like 100%, like with a suitcase. So like every, two times a year in a lull when Jordy was out, I'd bring up this suitcase of shoe story.
Yeah.
One of our good friends, Brent Miller, a great producer, editor, he was doing a long form interview with Jordy, and he was like, so yeah, Joe talks about this suitcase you have for the shoes. What's it like? How many can you fit? When did you get into shoe collection? He's like, I don't know what Joe's talking about. Like I've never had. And Jordy never told me that, hey, that's wrong. Like I see him all the time.
Let you go with it.
He just let me go with it. And then when I saw Jordy after that, I was like, dude, I thought this was a real story for like 10 years. And he was like, you know what? I really would want one, So I kind of liked it. And we had a big laugh, but it turned out that there was no such thing. So yeah, little things like that happen. You're trying to really judge the source. And for a story like that being a little fabricated, you can move on pretty easily from it. All the other like factual history you want to make sure you're on top of. And surfing in some ways isn't the best with organization. And so you've got to do some digging, and really lucky now with the team at WSL, guys like Milby Shannon, Ted Chavanis, there's a guy named Chad Weber. Man, if I think of something, I'll be, hey, can you help me like finish this thought, or what happened maybe at this event in this day? And they'll like do everything they can to find it. They'll find stuff on their own that they find is interesting. So it's been really fun seeing it evolve. You're not so on your own anymore like we used to be. Okay. Now you've got like a bunch of people that are ready to make the best show on earth. So that feels really good at this part of my career,
What about like going backwards in like old surfing and surfer or tracks magazines? Because back in the day, in the 80s, 70s, or even 90s, they were writing about it. That's how we found out about what was happening on the tour.
Yeah, no, for sure. Those magazines are gold. I think that's the best way to actually look back on those little things that you just wouldn't hear about every day is usually found in those old mags. So yeah, when I get my hands on those things, I definitely keep them. And then with all my spiral notebooks from all the events I've called, I've never thrown one away. So if I have time to go through and try to read through my really bad handwriting, usually I can find some organization there. Also check out Encyclopedia Surfing. Matt Warshaw has a lot of stuff on there, which is really fun to check out. Yeah, I don't know, having those resources from people that are still living too, surfing's not that old, especially in competitive perspective with the tour starting in 76. So a lot of those world champs that were winning back then are still around. And once you get to know them and get their phone number, it's really fun to be like, hey, what happened here? And when they tell it, you try to retell it the best you can,
Back a couple of years ago, you had the Cotton Side, the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Why did you start that?
Oh, that was gnarly, Mike. Yeah, that was when the world shut down. And to keep the tour alive, Andrew Stark, who runs the APAC division in Australia for WSL, he was able to work with the Australian government and put us in a Qantas flight, like a normal giant plane that you would use commercially from LA to Sydney. And he got that crossed off that we could fly into the country. So everybody had to pass all the tests and COVID tests. And then we got on this flight and there was nobody on it. There was a couple flight attendants. We didn't see them the whole time. It was wild just being on this plane. And I felt like it was a great moment to grab the mic and say, welcome aboard, everybody. Please buckle your seatbelts. And that was like a checklist thing for me. But yeah, it was random. We flew into the country, the military met us there, and then we had to go into a hotel for 2 weeks straight without leaving.
Yeah.
So the Caught Inside podcast wasn't my idea, to be honest. It was a producer, now director, Milby Shannon. He was like, hey, I'm giving you more work, but this is for your health. You know, it was like,
Yeah.
you're going to wake up and you're going to have something to do. And I was, first of all, happy to do it. But also, when I look back on that 2 weeks, I was like, oh, thank goodness I had that, man. Like, I had something
Yeah.
to prepare for. And we'd have our little podcast going just like we're doing now. I remember certain people didn't want to hang up the phone. It was like we had nothing to go to. So I was the whole thing with Jack Robinson. He was like, I was like, all right, well, thanks, Jack. That was great. And he was like,
Yeah.
he's like, well, what are you going to do? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And he's like, I might do some yoga. I'm like, I've never stretched before, but I'll try. You know, like, oh, it's just like, I remember it was just such a weird time of just trying to communicate with people. It was nice. We had like resources, but you're like, maybe that's like what jail's like, you know?
Oh yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Probably pretty close. With the traveling too, let's go backwards. The traveling. Did you ever have any scary experiences on these planes?
Yeah, it was one of the early flights. It was that first trip I took to Brazil for the CT event for the women. And we flew into Sao Paulo, and then we took a small flight into a place called Ilhéus, if I'm saying that right. And then you'd take this bus ride up to Itacaré. This guy, Sean, he was super tall. He worked for Fuel TV. This was before the iPhones came out. And we were about to come in for a landing, so he's getting all situated. And he's like, hey, Joe, check out this crazy global phone that Fuel TV just gave me. Thing was giant. You know, it was like big round thing. And he's like, yeah, I haven't even turned it on yet, but like my boss said I could use it. Now we can connect with a lot of people easier. I'm like, that thing's huge. And I handed it back to him. And it felt like after that, we just dropped out of the sky. Just
Wow.
the landing just went boom. And like when we hit, it was so gnarly with whiplash. I hit my head on the front seat, the seat in front of me.
Oh shit.
We were all so rattled. The whole plane collectively was like, oh, like groaning from just your body getting whipped like that. And I went to like go get my bag out of the overhead compartment, and it was like 20 rows forward. It was nowhere to be found. The whole thing was shook so hard.
Oh no.
And like you're still kind of going, God, that was so gnarly. I felt like you were in a car crash for a second, but everyone made it, you know, we're fine. And the funniest thing was I look at Sean and he's going, dude, my phone. I can't find my phone. And I was like, what? It like had whipped out of his hand, like he couldn't hang on.
Yeah,
to
it
it.
just flew.
So violent. And we didn't know any Portuguese. The guys are telling us to get off the plane. We're the last ones on there because I started helping them look through like the seats. And I kept going, oh, there's like I was trying to use some Spanish, like telefono, you know, like we're trying to find it, you know. And he's like, no, basically was like, no, get off. And Sean's like, dude, I haven't even turned it on. And we basically had to leave it. He never got to use that phone, but I'll like never forget, like that was the heaviest landing I've ever had in my life. And thank God that's still the heaviest. That's like, that was 2007. That still takes the cake because I thought we were going down for sure.
Oh my God, that's scary.
Yeah.
But most of the time it's just smooth sailing.
Yeah, knock on wood. It's like for amount times I've flown, I think there are moments I've had that where people on the flight are getting scared, but I don't know. I kind of have taken a mental take on it that, hey, I'm already here. There's nothing I can do. And I've in some way, like I manage my emotion pretty well in those turbulent times in a plane. So I can fly pretty well. I don't necessarily enjoy those long flights, but I can manage, I can get through it. And if things get a little funky, you know, I'll just stay calm. And I know there's nothing I can do. So I just kind of ride it out.
What do you think the state of pro surfing is today?
Yeah, it's a great time, man. It's wild how much it's evolved, huh, man? I just think about all the different eras we've had. There's so much to enjoy about it. You know, everyone has the opportunity to be an individual with the way they want to take on their career, but also with the highest level of surfing. We're watching that on tour, I believe. You know, like the people that can produce big scores under pressure is always going to be amazing to me. And I really do feel like we're watching that at the highest level. Every time you think that you've seen it all, the next year brings something new and brings something fresh. And I really, really enjoy these little understated rivalries. I really enjoy how the women's tour took the headlines this past season. Yeah,
Yeah.
hype and shows and even with progression as well. And so you look at the women's tour, and with Aaron Brooks getting added to it next year, Bella Kenworthy, it's getting younger and younger, and
Uh-huh.
so gnarly with how willing they are to be competitive, how willing they are to have a rival, how willing they are to push it. And it's really fresh. That is so tangible on the women's side that they're like, hey, we're going all out. Let's do this. And with the guys tour, led by John getting his third title, and that inspiring Medina, and then the Griffin, Ethan, Felipe coming back kind of stories. There's so much to get excited about when you look at the schedule next year for the tour and
Yep.
the names on it. You're kind of like, I don't know if there's been a better class of athletes on tour with the schedule to really back them up. So with J Bay returning, with Lowers now, a regular season event, which I always think is going to be the best for that venue. It's like, wow, you just can't wait to get this thing started, really.
Super excited. What event are you looking forward to most this upcoming year?
Gosh, I really am curious to see how the finals format is going to play out at Cloudbreak.
Okay.
We've seen that format now 4 times, and it's been Lowers. And I just am going, man, watching the 5th seed take on number 4 seed and imagining it like 8 to 10 foot Cloudbreak.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I've got to like put a seatbelt on and pace myself because I can't get there fast enough. I'm just going,
Yeah.
with a world title on the line at a wave like Cloudbreak, what more could you ask for? That is insane. So that's going to be fun, as just finishing the year on a high, being at a world-class venue like that. And even saying, if it's smaller, what we saw this year
Yeah.
at the last event before Lowers, Cloudbreak was dead flat when we got there. That was like not the greatest forecast by any means. And it still delivered some hi-fi surfing. So the hope would be to get it draining where guys are getting stand-up barrels and then doing huge turns. I think it's a great venue that has some depth just in case, the swell doesn't deliver like we hope for. J Bay being back, I think that's super important for the tour. It's a personal favorite of mine to ride. And I think earlier I talked about how I can get dry docked at some events where I just don't get time to surf. But there are some events where you get really lucky and the forecast is great, and there's a day they call off that's insanely fun. And J Bay memories come to mind where you go, whoa, they called it off, the swell picked up, and those are days you never forget, So
Oh yeah.
I'm excited about J Bay returning. And then with Lowers moving to that regular season event, I think Lowers is so valuable for high performance surfing. And I think we always talk about airs, but it's really about big combos and power and everything. So I think that venue I hope should stay around for a very long time, just for what it brings into a complete season. I think it really completes the tour.
You being the announcer, how much say do you have with WSL?
Yeah, I don't really, to be honest. Yeah, I throw my opinions out, in passing, just because I'm in close quarters with a lot of people that make those hard decisions. But
and they're hard.
No one's calling me going, "Hey Joe, what do you think about this event?" I wish. I would love to play, but no, they have a great team that handles all that, and then I'll throw 2 cents into a completely full piggy bank, and I'll be, oh, okay, you guys figured that out. But yeah, no formal questions are asked to me about events at all.
If you could just pick a destination to go surf for a week or 2 by yourself, where would you pick?
Yeah, J Bay's on there. Fiji's on there for me. I did my first boat trip to the Mentawais 2 years ago now.
Okay.
And that blew my mind. I think I had gone through a run of just traveling for the tour. You need to fit in those personal surf trips, and that was an eye opener for me of going, I can't believe I haven't done this yet. Jumping off the boat with 8 of your buddies and there's no one out, into a Mentawai lineup that is just draining.
Amazing.
That is just this part of your soul that you need to really consider in your life. You can't, I don't know, for me, I think I just would travel so much in a year. I would just go, you know what, that's it for traveling. And I wasn't doing like a surf trip without work attached to it. and it'd been a few years, and all of a sudden that moment I was like, okay, I'm doing that like every 2 years at least, you know. And
That's rad.
I just saw how important it was for my surfing, for my soul, for me, you know. So
Yeah.
it was a little bit of self-care, Mike. Yeah, it was great.
Walking around the events and stuff, you're kind of the face of WSL. Everyone knows who you are. Is it hard to walk around the events, shaking hands and kissing babies?
It's really cool, man. It's I know what you mean. It is really funny. I think the first time you realize that everybody knows you, you know?
Yeah.
And I'll feel that in the water too, you know, where
For sure.
I'm not anonymous anymore.
Right.
And sometimes in surfing, personally, I have moments where I miss it a little bit. But on tour around contests, it's great. It's like a big family, and there's a lot of characters that are kind of in the same boat, even from coaches that are on air all the time to surfers themselves. So I think almost at the events themselves, it's actually you're in a bubble that feels really normal, you know? It feels really like you're together in it, you know? It's almost more when you go outside of your bubble is when you can feel a little embarrassed or a little self-conscious. Sometimes you just have your guard down and you don't realize that someone knows you already.
Yeah.
More often than not, I'd say all the time, it's really positive, you know, and it's cool to be able to spend time with people that really want to, like, and then also just you can get past the awkward meeting point and you just can start with something, you know. And sometimes I'm in the water today and I meet a lot of people, which is I'm so lucky to do that. Sometimes I'll be like, shoot, have I traveled with this person before? Sometimes it's seen in 10 years and they're like, dude, remember we were in Portugal 10 years ago. I'm like, there it was, you know, like I love when people give me a little like reminder just because traveling so much, you don't want to forget someone's name. Anytime I can pull it out when I haven't seen someone in like years, I feel like that's a win, you know?
Yeah, for sure. But you can still go to Middle America and surfing hasn't quite gone there yet. I don't think. I know it has grown, but.
Oh, totally. I think it's the right amount, you know? Like as soon as we get off the coast a little bit, no one's saying hi, you know? But that you'll just be in a surf bubble and sometimes it's really fun. Sometimes they're just like, hey, you should go surf here if I'm traveling or whatever it is. And it's definitely benefited more, you know, than not. So it's really cool. But yeah, like you said, there's still plenty of room to be anonymous in this world.
Yeah, for sure. Wave pools, inland spots. Is that going to grow pro surfing, you think?
Yeah, it's crazy just how much it already has with
for sure.
What Erin Brooks has been able to produce in the wave systems. She's been so dedicated to spending a week at Waco and just going air for air and just being able to get that repetition that surfers just never had. You know, you would have to be able to catch a lot of waves in a crowd. You'd have to have a section that would allow you to do whatever you were working on. So progression just had a much slower pace. And now it's like every time you blink, especially with social media, you know, Yago's done some crazy variation upside down, like Mick Twist type stuff. And Matt Miola's doing back rolls. And now you're seeing people land them in heats like Mateus Hurdy did in Saquarema, all modeling from what, you know, Flynn Novak was doing at Rocky Point years ago. And Flynn was so good at getting that back roll flip down, the Flintstone flip, that one, he gets a lot of great waves at Rockies. Two, he knows what he's looking for, and the trade winds would often give him that right wind for that rotation. So he kind of had a wave system, you know, in his backyard in some ways, but still there was no one else going for him. But now with all these wave pools, there's more than a few people that have pulled that. And I really think that because of the pools.
Plus it's building acknowledgement of surfing. Yeah,
it's a totally different thing, isn't it? It's like, I've surfed in the Melbourne pool, Urban Surf, and it's just you're in this line and then all of a sudden you're against a wall and it's your turn. And when I surfed the right, I was on the wall and I kind of was just, someone was talking to me and then I kind of hit the wall with my arm. I was like, whoa, dude, pay attention. And I was just going down the line, feeling it out. And I was like, I'll do a floater. And then the thing hollowed out and I got stuck. So I just ejected. and I hit the deck and it felt like I hit concrete. And I was
Holy
going,
crap.
oh my gosh, I gotta really focus, man. You know, like
Yeah.
this is not just a pool where you can play around. It was like I asked the guy later, like, oh, there's so many injuries. That's why we pass out helmets.
Yeah.
But then I realized like where to sit and where to turn. And I was like, this is still freakish to me as like a kid just going like, all you want to do is surf all day. And now you really
Yeah.
you can go surfing if you have access to that pool. It's crazy.
What's in your personal quiver today? What are you riding?
Yeah, I've been riding a lot of boards from Timmy Patterson, and
Okay.
he's been amazing. For those boards, it's a lot of blades, you know. It's like the Italo model, my little like 6.0, 19 and a quarter, 2 3/8, like round
Wow.
tails, couple swallows. Playing with a few different models that Timmy has, like the gas pedal. And this one he found that is like an old template he used for Randy Irons back in the early 2000s. I have like a 6.3 in that. So yeah, a lot of short boards. I've got more depth as far as range. Like I rode more of a log last night before dark, just real quick at Cammy's. And
Okay.
I like to mix it up with like feelings like that, you know. I have
Yeah.
an old like fish from CI that I just have had in the quiver forever on some smaller days. Where I'm at now is I really want to get a bit more diverse. You know, I sort of for a while just riding standard shortboards has been amazing, but
Hmm.
I don't know. I just want to have like different feelings, I guess, and just have a
Yeah, of
board that
course.
just feels completely different. And I think I've got a lot of openings for that. Like maybe that old 7/8 single fin I rode when I was a kid, you know, if I had a
Yep.
modern update of that just to have fun on, just to change gears would be really cool.
Now, with you traveling and stuff, have you ever jumped into a local contest? When's the last heat you surfed? I should
Oh
say?
wow. Wow, I would take a second to think. When was the last one? Oh, yeah, last heat I surfed was on Kauai. It was
Okay.
the Live Like Cyan Grom Fest that my family
Okay.
puts on, and there's this division that they used to have where an adult surfs with a kid, and you
Oh,
you
yeah.
accumulate your score. And so
Yep.
Sebastian Zietz is his nephew, Oliver Zietz,
Mhm.
really good surfer. His dad is an amazing surfer, so Seabass's older brother rips, and he had a little back injury, and so I was just helping out on the mic and hanging out and helping the fam, and
Uh-huh.
all of a sudden Oliver comes up to me and was like, "Hey, I need a teammate for that deal." And I was like, "Oh, I don't even have a board down here." And he's like, "Oh, my dad's got a board." They started waxing up this thing, and I was like, "When's our
Yeah.
heat?" He's like, "Oh, just in a few minutes." I was like, "Oh, shoot, all right." And I went on the back, and I was like, "Oh, whoa!" And I started going like, "Okay, where am I going to sit?" And the vibes are always so good at that event, and it was so
Yeah.
funny. I got a wave, like a left. I did a little turn and then fell, and then I kind of got like an okay one. It wasn't a great performance, but I came
Yeah.
in. I was still stoked. I was like, "Yeah, Oliver, that was fun." He was. I could just look at his face. I was like, "Oh, he is so disappointed in me." You know, like he was like, "I had plans of winning this thing." He like, "Where were you, bro?" You know, and the next year that same heat was coming up, and I saw him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm good, dude. I'm good." Like he found this. Vika Stillwell. I don't know if you remember him. He was just like a much better choice because he's such he's such an amazing surfer. But
Yeah.
before that heat, it would probably go back to the college days, I think, of competing for UCSB, and sometimes those regional events would pop up, those old Volcom Stone contests, and if I was in
Yep.
the area, I would enter them and stuff. But yeah, as far as me, not a part of any board riders or anything, so it's been a while for sure.
Yeah. It's a good reminder. I think a lot of people with watch pro surf may never have ever surfed a heat. Really.
Yeah, I think about that a lot too with explaining more about it's like there's that fine line in a broadcast. You don't want to bore the core, but you want to.
Mm-hmm.
I think those little fundamentals of surfing a heat would actually feel good to the core too, of also even just how a heat works, you know, and the simple rules that go along with it. If someone turns it on
Yeah.
halfway through, not overdoing that explanation, but you know, it'd probably be helpful throughout the season, and even for lifelong surfers where they can kind of remember that old like local contest they entered, and they'd probably now look back and go, "Oh, that's what I did wrong." You know, I always think about that with like how many heats I've seen now. It's like, man, in those college heats and high school heats, and I was not even preparing myself to succeed. I would just see how it went. Now watching so many heats and being around coaches and strategies are constant. I'm just going, oh my gosh, if I could go back and surf in that UCSB heat at C Street in Ventura, I might be able to make it.
Yeah. Joe, is there an all-time favorite heat you called? Or is there just too many?
There's quite a few. The crazy one that always pops is John Florence and Kelly Slater 2014 semifinal in Tahiti, because the waves were as good as it gets, and they finished in a tiebreak. First exchange was a 10 for Kelly and 9-9 for John. And the fact that it was Kelly and John, and you're hoping you'd get to see that matchup, not just at the venue, but in waves like that, where you're going, okay, this is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
It's Kelly versus John.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just would want to see that all the time, and to finally get it just with the draw and how often, someone could lose right before, or the waves could go bad. And the build up to that was something I'll never forget. Like, sitting in the booth, I remember sitting down, just looking at pots and just going like, oh my gosh, this is as good as it gets. And
yeah,
so that one was powerful. There was some crazy ones at Honolulu Bay, Carissa and Sally Fitzgibbons, that they were going barrel for barrel and trading high nines the whole heat. Those really popped for me as far as performance and the game changing a bit too. A great heat is all about big lead changes and both surfers surfing at the top of their game, so
yeah, for sure.
There's so many that come to mind, but I think the Kelly John is still winning at the moment.
Awesome. Well, Joe Torpel, thank you so much for coming on the Quivercast, man. I super appreciate it. It was super fun talking.
Oh, absolute blast, Mike. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, everybody, this is Mike and Joe. We are out of here.
You go left, I go right. Man, this wave is out of sight. Going surfing, going surfing, going surfing with friends. Ride this wave to the shore. Paddle out, I'm gonna catch 10 more. Going surfing, going surfing, going surfing with friends. I don't care if it's wrong or right. I'm gonna do it all day, I'm gonna do it all night. I'm going surfing, I'm going surfing, going surfing with friends. On my way, it's a beautiful day. I'm going surfing, I'm going surfing, going surfing with friends. Woo!
Hey, you guys, Endless Summer box set. This thing is legit. It's authentic, numbered certificate in it. It has a 5-frame film strip. From the original print, you literally own a piece of history. It has a specially minted bronze medallion. Dude, that thing's sick. Okay, there's so much more here. Go to the show notes. There's a link on there. Go check this piece of history out. This thing's rad. Seriously. Smithsonian American History Museum has it. It took 4 years of research with 3.5 in production. All hand assembled. This thing's rad. So much to this awesome box set. Remastered DVD, sharper images than the original film. But dude, this thing's so sick. Link in the show notes.